We've all looked into the Great Pyramid and wondered, how did an ancient civilization build it with nothing but rope and elbow grease? For centuries, the truth has been buried under a desert of failed theories and impossible math. But in 2026, a shocking breakthrough changed everything. A secret hidden inside the very stones of the pyramid has finally been unlocked, revealing something that was thousands of years ahead of its time. The 3-minute miracle. At the foot of the world's most famous monument, a 2.5-ton block of limestone sits in the scorching heat. To us, it's a relic from a world long gone. To the workers of the Old Kingdom, it was a ticking time bomb. You see, according to the math, to finish the Great Pyramid within Pharaoh Khufu's reign, his builders had to place one of these massive stones every 3 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 20 years. For 4,500 years, we've looked at the numbers and thought it was physically impossible. We've looked at the desert sands for traces of massive ramps that just aren't there. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place? A 2026 breakthrough by an independent researcher has just provided proof that the Egyptians weren't just master builders, they were the world's first technologically advanced civilization. They created a system so sophisticated that it makes our modern construction projects look like child's play, allowing thousands of men to work in a way more efficiently than we expected to find in ancient history. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of this sophisticated system, let us take a look at the spectacular failure of the experts who came before, the Red Sea Scrolls. For decades, we've been fed a narrative of thousands of slaves, driven by the lash of a whip, dragging stones across an infinite desert. But as it turns out, this narrative was flawed. To build a ramp high enough to reach the summit of the Great Pyramid at a manageable grade, you would need a structure so massive it would contain more material than the pyramid itself. But the narrative changed in 2013 with the discovery of the Red Sea Scrolls, the diary of a high-level logistics officer named Mira, which shook the foundations of everything we thought we knew, debunking the slave labor myth. Mira was documenting delivery shipments, managing specialized teams, and navigating the brutal KPIs of a pharaoh who had given them a deadline. This realization turned the academic world upside down. If there were no slaves and no massive external ramps, how on earth did they move 2.3 million blocks without the whole project grinding to a halt? And it wasn't just about the sheer number of blocks. There was also variety. Most of the pyramid is common limestone, but the important sections, like the King's Chamber and the internal ceilings, required something much more prestigious: granite. And this is where things get interesting. You see, while the limestone was being cut right there on the Giza Plateau, the granite was a different story entirely. It had to come from Aswan, which is over 500 miles to the south. To get them to the pyramid, they had to be loaded onto custom-built barges, floated down the Nile, and dragged across the desert. A single shipment could take years, but evidence suggests that these granite beams weren't ordered as the building progressed. They were likely commissioned and delivered before the very first limestone block was even laid. If the design changed, or if the pyramid's internal height shifted by even a few inches, these 80-ton granite blocks would become the world's most expensive paperweights. You can't just trim a massive granite beam on site. So, why did Pharaoh Khufu take the risk? Some say it was the pharaoh's ego. Others suggest that the architects were following a master blueprint that was so precise it allowed for zero errors. But how do you move an 80-ton block up a rising mountain of stone without a modern crane? The digital simulation. For centuries, this question was the biggest hurdle for pyramid theories until a man named Vicente Luis Rosell Roig would make history. Vicente Luis Rosell Roig was an independent researcher, and for 6 long years, Roig obsessed over this single problem: So he turned to computers to find an answer. He built a digital twin of the Great Pyramid and ran a simulation of the entire construction process. He programmed the physics of the ropes, the friction of the sleds, and the weight of the limestone, creating a world where every single one of those 2.3 million blocks had to be accounted for. For years, his simulations failed. The ramps were too steep, the blocks moved too slowly, or the structure became unstable. But he didn't give up. He adjusted the variables, refined the logistics, and searched for the hidden technique that the ancient architects must have used. And then it happened. The simulation ran from the bedrock to the capstone without a single error. Roig had discovered a multi-lane, adaptive system that fit the timeline, the geography, and the physical evidence perfectly. But what exactly did the computer reveal? For centuries, we've been looking for a mountain of a ramp, a singular, massive structure that would have scarred the landscape. But Vicente Luis Rosell Roig's 3D computational framework suggests that the ancient architects were much more subtle and, frankly, much more brilliant. This is what he calls the Integrated Edge Ramp, IER, model. Instead of one giant ramp, there were 4 spiral staircases winding their way up the pyramid. But these weren't external stairs made of wood or scaffolding. They were built into the very bones of the pyramid itself, located at each of the 4 corners. By simply omitting a few specific courses of stone along the edges as they built upward, the Egyptians created a continuous, helical pathway. And these ramps weren't removed. They were backfilled. They placed the missing stones into the edge channels they had been using, working their way from the top down, and then covered the entire thing with a smooth, white Tura limestone casing. The evidence is literally buried under the casing stones. But as groundbreaking as this edge ramp system sounds, it isn't the only internal theory on the table. Houdin's theory. In the early 2000s, French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin rocked the world by suggesting the pyramid was built from the inside out, using a single, corkscrew-shaped internal tunnel. It was a brilliant theory, although upon closer inspection, Houdin's theory seemed less probable than Roig's. You see, Houdin's model relies on a single, narrow internal ramp. Imagine trying to move 2.3 million blocks through a one-way tunnel. If one sled breaks down or one team tires out, the entire production line stops. Furthermore, Roig's edge ramps aren't buried deep in the dark core. They are right at the perimeter, exposed to the light, where supervisors could actually see what was happening. You couldn't manage 20,000 men if they were all stuck in a dark tunnel. More evidence supporting Roig's theory surfaced in 2017, when an international team of scientists used muons, subatomic particles that rain down from space, to effectively X-ray the Great Pyramid. These particles pass through solid stone but get deflected by empty space. And what they saw was shocking. Deep within the limestone, they detected a massive 100-foot-long void and a mysterious corridor behind the north face. The theories were endless, but none of them felt quite right. That is, until Vicente Luis Rosell Roig applied his digital blueprint to the scanned data. In Roig's integrated edge ramp model, you can't just have a smooth, endless ramp. You need switching stations, internal spaces where teams could rest, turn the massive sleds, or store counterweights to help pull the heavier blocks. According to the simulation, the North Face corridor isn't a tomb. It's a high-traffic lobby. The big void was identified as a critical structural cavity designed to alleviate the pressure on the Grand Gallery, allowing the work to continue without the weight of the pyramid crushing the internal pathways. For thousands of years, the pyramid has been holding on to the physical proof of its own construction, just waiting for our technology to catch up with its genius. But the muon scans aren't the only evidence. In the world of high-stakes investigations, we often look for marks left behind by events. The Great Pyramid is no different. While the polished casing stones, that once made this monument glow like a star are mostly gone, the structure beneath them remains. And if you look at the southeast corner, the structure has obviously had better days. For decades, tourists and even some archaeologists walked right past these anomalies, dismissing them as natural weathering or the result of medieval stone quarrying. But when you look at it through the lens of Vicente Luis Rosell Roig's edge ramp model, those marks take on a much more functional meaning. The stone at the southeast corner is worse for wear because this was the main entry point for millions of blocks. According to the simulation, the southeast corner wasn't just another edge, it was the primary on-ramp. Because of the way the pyramid is situated relative to the ancient quarries and the Nile harbors, the vast majority of those 2.3 million blocks would have funneled through this one specific coordinate. The weight wasn't just vertical, it was lateral. Every time a team of workers turned a corner to continue the spiral upward, the sleds would leave marks in the stone. Roig's research identifies intense wear patterns and structural stress fractures in the limestone precisely where his model predicts the heaviest traffic flow. But it wasn't just the limestone that left its mark. Remember those 80-ton granite blocks we discussed earlier? Moving those up the edge ramps would have required more effort and likely had worse effects on the stone. Course 206. However, just as we think we've solved it, we hit another wall, a problem that even the most advanced computer simulations struggle with. As a pyramid rises, the stones usually get smaller. It's common sense. You want your heaviest lifting at the bottom and your lighter, easier work at the top, where space is tight. But the Great Pyramid doesn't play by the rules. Near the very summit, about 450 feet in the air, there is a sudden, inexplicable thickening of the stone. Course 206 is composed of massive blocks that weigh over 10 tons each, monsters that have no business being that high up. At this height, the pyramid is too narrow for Roig's ramps. So did the Egyptians switch to a secret technology for the summit? If they could move 80-ton beams, maybe Course 206 wasn't a problem for them. But it remains a massive problem for us. In the world of archaeology, context is everything. If you're going to claim you've solved the greatest mystery of the ancient world, you need proof that's just as grand as the mystery. But when Vicente Luis Rosell Roig looked for physical proof of his four-faced ramp system, he didn't find it at Giza. Instead, he pointed to the Sinki Pyramid, a small, unfinished, and frankly, somewhat pathetic-looking pile of mud brick and stone. The Sinki Pyramid is what experts call a cult pyramid, and it's about as far from the Great Pyramid as you can get while still using the word pyramid. It's tiny, it's simple, and most importantly, it was never finished. Roig argues that because Sinki shows clear evidence of 4 perpendicular ramps, one on each face, it proves the concept was adopted by the Egyptians. Critics argue that he's comparing a failed experiment to a masterpiece. They point to other structures, like the Meidum or the Menkora Pyramid, which show evidence of a step-core construction, a completely different method that doesn't rely on edge ramps at all. Roig found a beautiful mathematical solution on his computer, but then had to scramble to find anything in the real world that backed it up. This is where the high-tech excitement of the 2026 simulation is met with reality. We can sit in our offices, staring at algorithms and models, but there is a profound, almost tragic gap between our digital world and the ancient one. Every time we find a new answer to the question, like the edge ramp, we realize how much of the original knowledge has simply evaporated. But maybe that silence is exactly what the Old Kingdom intended. Maybe the secret nature of these constructs wasn't just an engineering trick, but a final act of security. The blueprint. When we look back at the Old Kingdom, we tend to see a primitive society, but that is our first mistake. These weren't just ancient people, they were elite engineers and architectural geniuses with more efficiency than a modern-day Silicon Valley giant. For years, the internet has been a battlefield. In one corner, you had the internal ramp crowd, following Jean-Pierre Houdin, and in the other, the new 2026 Edge Ramp supporters, following Vicente Luis Rosell Ruag. Both sides claimed they had the only answer. But the truth that has come to light is that the Egyptians didn't use just one system. They used a multi-lane highway for the small stuff and a heavy-lift elevator for the heavy things. In this hybrid model, Ruag's edge ramps acted as the high-speed lanes, allowing thousands of workers to move the millions of standard limestone blocks within that relentless 3-minute time stamp. While the ramps ran on the corners, the architects were running a second, specialized operation in the center, the Houdin counterweight system, using the massive internal Grand Gallery as a vertical chute. They could use heavy weights to help hoist the granite blocks straight up the middle of the pyramid. But even with effective systems in place, you have to ask, how did the pyramid actually hold itself up? How do you leave hollow ramps and massive voids inside a 6 million-ton structure without the whole thing collapsing into a pile of rubble? In the world of high-stakes engineering, there is a tool that determines building safety, finite element analysis, or FEA. It's the same technology NASA uses to test spacecraft, and architects use to ensure skyscrapers don't topple in a hurricane. It works by breaking a complex structure into millions of tiny digital elements to see how they handle pressure, gravity, and stress. For years, critics laughed at the idea of internal or edge ramps. Their argument was simple. If you leave hollow tunnels or gaps inside a 6 million-ton limestone mountain, the sheer weight of the pyramid would cause those tunnels to implode. The pyramid would literally crush itself from the inside out. But Vicente Luis Rosell Ruag subjected his integrated edge ramp model to a brutal FEA stress test, simulating every pound of pressure that Course 206 and the limestone core would exert on those internal pathways. And the digital pyramid didn't flinch. The FFEA proved that the integrated edge ramps were positioned with such mathematical genius that the surrounding masonry actually distributed the load around the gaps. We are no longer debating whether the Egyptians could have built it this way. We are looking at a verified structural blueprint that says they must have. The simulation shows the blocks sliding into place, the ramps handling the friction, and the core standing firm under the weight. For the first time in 4,500 years, the mystery has been stripped of its impossible status. It wasn't aliens, or lost magic, or divine intervention. It was just a group of human beings who were so technologically advanced in their thinking that it took us 4 millennia just to build a computer capable of understanding their logic. But as the code confirms our suspicions, we're left with one final, tantalizing question. If the blueprint is real and the math is perfect, what does this mean for the secrets still hidden behind the casing? Are we ready to face what's actually inside those 4 corners? After 4,500 years of staring at the Giza skyline and wondering if we were losing our minds, are we finally looking at the actual blueprint? For the first time, we have a theory that doesn't just sound good in a lecture hall, it holds up against the hard logic of a supercomputer. Vicente Luis Rosell Ruag didn't just give us a new story, he gave us a system. But because we have been so obsessed with the how, we're terrified of the why. Why did they push themselves to the brink of physical and mathematical extinction for a tomb? The Great Pyramid isn't just a pile of limestone. It's an indelible mark left by architects who played a long game we can barely comprehend. They weren't just building for their king, they were building for us. They knew that thousands of years later, some civilization would come along with their advanced tools and machines to inspect their work, and they wanted to make sure we were sufficiently humbled. Maybe the mystery is the point. Maybe the edge ramp is just the latest chapter in a story that will never truly end. But one thing is certain, the 3-minute cycle is no longer a myth. It's a challenge. and the sand is still waiting to tell us the rest. But let's be honest with each other. This is the internet, and in the world of archaeology, the truth is rarely simple. Even with the FEA stress tests and the muons backing Roig's theory up, we still have that massive 10-ton elephant in the room. Course 206. Does that narrow summit prove that the edge ramp was just a clever workaround for the easy parts? Or is Course 206 the ultimate proof that, this time, despite all our 2026 tech, we still know absolutely nothing about advanced Egyptian engineering? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. Now, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the video on your screen now. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.